Hi everybody, so I did my final presentation over a Sunday on the Grande Jatte by George Seurat. It's an oil on canvas painting. George Seurat painted it between 1884 and 1886. One reason I chose this painting was mainly because I find the history and the story behind it really interesting, so that's mainly what I'll be talking about. Sometimes people have trouble interpreting the meaning behind this piece, and so that's another reason I chose it, is just because I found it challenging but also very interesting. So George Seurat, basically events that happen in his life are very influential on this piece. So he was born in Paris on December 2nd, 1859, and his mother came from a long line of artists, so he already had artistry in his blood. From very early on, he started studying under Justin Lequesne, and then shortly after, he began going to an artist academy. While this academy was very well renowned, it did not match the style of Seurat's painting at all, and so eventually he decided to drop out, and during this time, after he dropped out, he visited the island of the Grande Jatte and was on the riverbanks of Seine, and this is when he received his inspiration to paint the painting that I will be talking about today. The area is a very kind of wealthy vacation spot for people in that area at the time, and so really Seurat was very inspired by seeing all the people on the riverbanks, and there was so much going on that he decided to start working on this piece for an exhibition that was happening that next March in 1885. At the time, it was May 1884, and so basically he worked that summer at the riverbanks. He made a lot of sketches of different silhouettes of people, and if you haven't already seen the painting, you will later, and in this painting there are 48 different people, I think 3 dogs, and multiple boats, so there's a lot going on in the painting, and Seurat didn't just see all of this in one setting. He would go and sketch different ideas that he would later all combine to add into the painting. At this time, it was very common to mix science and art and use them in conjunction with one another. It's kind of like an impressionist painting, and so Seurat really tried to focus on this when he created his painting. So after a while of trying to get ready for the exhibition, sadly the exhibition got canceled that Seurat was originally planning his piece for, so he kind of put it away. He still had all of his sketches. Well, then at the same time, he became inspired by Charles Blanc's The Grammar of Painting and Engraving and Michel Eugene Chevreul's The Principles of Harmony and Contrast of Colors. Basically, these two books discuss the idea of the brilliance of colors, and the main idea is that when you mix two really vibrant hues, sometimes it might diminish their vibrance and kind of dull out the colors in some sorts of ways, and so the point was to show the optical illusion of color and the science behind that, and how optical illusion can help colors seem brighter. So an easier way to explain this is using an example. I used one in my paper of mixing red and blue. Normally, people in this day would mix red and blue to make purple on a color palette. Instead, what Seurat would do is he would put red and blue dots next to each other very closely, and it created an optical illusion in the eyes of the viewer that made it seem purple. And so he did this by using a technique called pointillism, which he ended up using for his piece. Basically, he had small brush strokes throughout the painting, and then he covered these brush strokes with various dots that created smooth transitions from different colors and different outlines, but still allowed for shape and form of figures. When he finally finished it in 1886, it did not receive a lot of good attention from the audience. People were very confused because Seurat was so mathematical and scientific in his creation of the piece. At the time, most of these pieces were created to immediately show emotion and had a clear message from the artist, but this piece did not. So initially, George Seurat did not receive a lot of praise from the artist community because of his mathematical representation of all the elements in the piece. But later on, people began to recognize how skillful his use of pointillism was and how useful it was in creating a sense of brilliance and light and depth in his painting. And so later on, he did receive the recognition. It didn't take very long for people to recognize the true skill of his work. And so that is kind of the history behind A Sunday on the Grand Jatte. Mainly, Seurat's point in painting it was just he was very inspired by the landscape of the Seine River and decided to use pointillism to try and showcase the different lights and values in that scene. And yeah, so I hope you enjoy the painting, and I hope you enjoyed this presentation. Thank you.